Just say you're ready, or you can cut my heart to pieces like machete. Maybe when I need a little space from the late nights, away from family, FaceTime doesn't hit when you ain't with.
Well, good evening. So glad that you could join us tonight. I am super excited, and I mean this. I probably need this conversation more than anybody. I had the opportunity to hear this gentleman speak almost a decade ago. He was at Yale University, and I'll be honest with you, I had no interest in going to see anybody talk at Yale because I didn't think they had anything worth listening to, quite frankly. I've seen these folks who work at elite institutions talk about education in the Black community. They don't have any idea what the hell they're talking about. And so they told me about this brother Howard Fuller, and I had heard about him. Dr. Howard Fuller is somebody who I had heard about, but you hear about people. I hear about people, and I don't always get to see who the person is that I thought I was going to meet. And he's from a generation that came before us, and sometimes when you're the next generation, believe it or not, there was a time when I was the next generation. Sometimes they give you the stiff arm. And so I went in with low expectations, and I sat there at Yale. I sat far back, because I didn't know how it was going to respond. And I've said some things, I guess, that some people find to be problematic, and I didn't know if he hated me or anything like that. So I know I liked what he had to say, but I didn't want to go there and meet him and find out that this brother Dr. Fuller was like an OG who hated me, and I just have to find a way to walk off and whatever. So when he started speaking, I thought, this man is insane. Like, what is he talking? He's talking like he's 16 years old, like he's going to burn this place down. Like, how did he get in here? And from that day to this, Dr. Howard Fuller has reminded me that the fire does not dim when it is burning in a man who is full of passion and capacity. So if you will, please join me in welcoming, quite frankly, my hero, Dr. Howard Fuller. What's happening, sir?
Hey, my brother, it's so good to see you, man. It's been too long, man, since I've seen you. You know what I'm saying? So,
look, well, we're gonna have to start with you aging. So what you're gonna need to do to pass the time between the last conversation and this conversation is you're gonna have to age. In fact, I just need you also to scoot over a little bit.
Yeah, no, I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
go to
there
we go. Whichever way is the other way for you. There we go. Better? There we go. Good. You have to age. Even if it was half your face, you're gonna have to age with the rest of your face. I wasn't joking. I went into that night at Yale, and I don't know if this has happened to you, but I'm just sick and tired of people talking who have no freaking idea what they're talking about when it comes to education in the Black community. And just because they're Black, and just because they have the PhD and they have the name that gives the impression that somehow they're about that life and that they have the backstory, and because they're now the tenured professor or the chaired professor at the whatever, I sit and listen to them, and I watch some of these goofy ass PowerPoint presentations that they put together as they sit and try and play on white guilt. And I thought, here we go again. While I'm busting my knuckles on the concrete of what's going on inside our community, up in the ivory tower talking about, well, we're no charter schools and you can't have that in public schools. And so when I went in there, a very good friend of mine who you knew, Brother Yusuf Salam, he told me I had to go to see you. And we're not very many people who told me I have to do anything. But he was one of them. You, of course, are the other. But he told me I had to go. And I have to be honest, how do you keep it going the way you have? Because you've put it all out there. You could just sit and be the chaired professor somewhere and live that life, brother. You've earned it.
Yeah, but you know what, Steve? What we've earned is the right to fight, for our people. I mean, I honestly believe that. And as I was sitting there listening to you talk, and really what's on my mind right now is today, like 7 of our kids tested positive for COVID. and one of the adults in the building. So in a lot of ways, Steve, to me, we're back where we were. Like, but there's no sense of urgency, right? Because, there's the vaccine that a lot of people are not taking, there's masks, this and that. But the reality of it is that our people are still getting sick. And because some of them are not vaccinated, they're going to get really sick. And when it comes to schools, I've never seen anything like this before. Because you know how it is about this time of the year. You're kind of in a groove, and kids kind of know what's expected, and the adults do too. But when you keep stopping and starting, because then because we had to say, well, okay, what we're going to do is just end school until after the holidays, right? And people are tired, people are beaten down, they're discouraged, they're dispirited. And so I just think that this is a period unlike anything that I've ever seen before. And when you are a part of an oppressed people and you are in a period that you've never seen before, it means you got to work triply hard, if there is such a word, to try to figure out how we're going to get out of this one. Right,
because people don't understand that. So I'm introducing you to some people, and I'm embarrassed that in the Black community that your name is not. It's obviously it's well known. It's not what I'm saying, but it is easy for us to know, and it's not a diss. The Jesse Jacksons of the world, he's earned it.
Yes.
Al Sharpton, he's earned it. Whether you like him or not, he's earned his place. People don't know, for me, the work that you do in the way that I think that they should. And what I mean is, when you're talking about our kids, you're talking about the children at the Howard Fuller Academy, which is a charter school in Wisconsin that wasn't just named for you, but named in your honor. And I think there's a big difference. Some people name the schools after themselves, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, I didn't make that decision. I told people not to do it, man. Because
I'm shocked if you let them do it.
Yeah, I don't think you should name schools after live people, especially crazy ones. You know what I mean?
Well, then there's that. Knowing I know that you fought it until the very end that they named the school after you. But let's be honest, it was earned. You have been at the forefront of what we commonly refer to the school choice as a school choice movement back before it was a thing. And I don't think that people understand how the notion of school choice was born in America. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, Steve, as you know, I don't support school choice. I support parent choice. And to me, there's a real distinction, right? Because when we got in this fight back in 1987, really, and the person that people really need to know more about in this country is Annette Polly Williams. Annette Polly Williams was a state legislator, a Democratic state legislator. We actually went to high school together. And, Polly died a few years ago. And I always used to tell Polly, like, hey, when I was a freshman, you were a senior, because we went to high school together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Polly was like fearless, man. If when people talk about the year of the Black woman, there's always going to be a year for Polly Williams. I mean, think Fannie Lou Hamer, man. Think, fighters. Think
right.
Who, are going to fight no matter what people think, right? That was Polly. And so it was Polly and a state senator named Gary George, another brother, who together they concocted a deal that made it possible for the first voucher bill to be passed in Milwaukee.
Is Polly a white woman?
No, she's a Black woman.
It's important that people understand that when you're talking about Polly, that you're talking about a Black woman was the mother of parent choice in America, is what you're saying.
And she's a Black Democrat.
Okay, that's what
right. And if you think it's hard to talk about parent choice in 2021, about to be 2022, think about what it was like in 1987. Think about the courage that it took for Polly to stand up and fight to say, my people have a right to choose. They have a right to choose. The abuse that Polly took was unbelievable, Steve. the abuse, particularly from so-called progressives and liberals, because you know how it is, like the way this country operates, if you say something that, quote, liberals think is a good deal, then you're smart. If you say something that so-called conservatives think, then you've been bamboozled. And so the way I look at it, man, is it's hard to have an independent Black mind that says, you know what? I don't care what you say on the right. I don't care what you say on the left. I care about my people. And I can think independently. I can figure out some things that I think will be better for us than what any of you all have to say. And so Polly was the kind of person, like you, frankly, who's willing to take the weight for the decisions that you make for our people. Because you know that if you're going to fight for 2 minutes out here for our people and be real about it, you got to be willing to take what comes with that. And you got to be willing to take it from all sides and all directions and wherever, right? Because it's coming, brother. It's coming.
I want to talk about the complexity of fighting, because it is too easy to think of the notion of fighting for Black people as an African American in a very pedestrian, linear way, meaning we are fighting them being white people, them being the opposite, them being people who are different than we are, them, right? And no one talks about when you open a school in your community, fighting the legislature to get the right to open a school in your community, to have your own parents and kids and politicians fighting you as you're fighting for them to gain access to the freedom that they have been fighting against all along. I don't think people understand the complexity of what it means when they and we are the same.
Yeah, I think the thing is, Steve, you know, like a lot of younger people, and everybody's younger than me, but you know, always talk about, you know, like how together people were, say, during the civil rights movement. The reality is, there were people who fought Martin Luther King. There were Negro preachers who met Martin Luther King when he got off the plane. I think it was in Mobile, to say, "Hey, man, like, we good. You know, our white people treating us okay." And so the thing that you're really putting your finger on is that when people say the Black community, there is no Black community. What there is are Black communities. There are Black people with different interests. There are Black people with different political views. There are Black people with different ways of looking at what it is that's happening to us. And so when you go into a fight, particularly for the poorest of our people, the people who lack power in this country, you're going to be hit not just by white people. You're going to be hit by Black people. You're going to be hit by Puerto Ricans. You're going to be hit from all different sides. And these folks are fighting for their own interests, but they know enough to act like they're trying to protect the Black community.
Well, they speak the language. Wouldn't it be nice if being Black meant as much to Black people as it does to people outside the community? Wouldn't it be powerful if it was as unifying an inspiration as it is a limitation? Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, but you know what it is, Steve? Like when we talk like this, and you and I have talked a lot, and I'm blessed that has happened. The reality of it is that we have to get up every day, and we have to decide, how am I going to try to make a difference for my people? For me, parent choice was one key element of that. But it's also important that our people have the right to vote. It's also important that our people have food, clothing, and shelter. Isn't it amazing how when the pandemic started, a lot of our people, working class people, people who are struggling every day to make it, they were simply low-wage workers. Soon as the pandemic hit, they became essential workers. They became the people that it was essential for them to go out and risk their lives so we could be on Zoom or Schoolyard, or whatever it is, right? And we can't forget that. See, we can't act like anything that happens to us universally. It doesn't. Some of our people suffer more, and they suffer more because they started out with less to begin with. And when a tragedy hits or a pandemic hits or whatever it is that hits, they suffer even more. And so those of us who are not suffering at that level, we have a responsibility now to like fight to try to change the conditions of those people who are suffering, to change their condition. And I don't, I mean, so when you ask me like, why don't you get tired? I mean, we all get tired. I mean, you get, some days you roll up in there, man, you're like, like I'm done.
You want to make me cry today, right?
Yeah, like I'm done, right? But the reality of it is that you can't be done. You can't be done if you care about our people. So to me, as long as you have a breath, as long as you have capacity, you have to raise your voice for those amongst us who have no voice. And you have to do it in a way that is consistent, and you have to do it in a way that actually tries to move the needle, not for your brand, but to move the needle for our community who is suffering.
I see a lot of people who are well known in the zeitgeist, who are brand makers. They want to be, especially among the professorial ranks. Those are the people who want to go from college to college on the speaking tour for the sake of speaking. And if I ask them, but actually, what do you do? Well, they teach an elite white school to overwhelmingly white audiences. And they talk about the Black experience as if it's a magical notion. And no one ever presses them because they're never put in a position where they have to defend their point. They never have to speak about the duplicitous relationship that we have with the conservatives, where on the one hand, we watch as many of them try to undermine our right to vote, while at the same time, it is they and only they who are fighting for our parents' right to choose a school, not because they support us, but because they support themselves. Conversely, don't understand that in the same places where Democrats reign supreme, we are in no better position. There's not a single Black community in the United States of America where Democrats run it, where we can be like, you know what? I'm moving there. I'm moving there. So you saw in the most guttural levels, you experienced it in the most guttural levels in the South as a teenager when you became an organizer. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So, when I went down to North Carolina, actually, I had just got out of graduate school and I had spent a year working in the Urban League. But I went down to North Carolina in 1965 now. And I went down there, Steve, because I got involved in the war on poverty. And because of the way that I thought, I actually thought we could win the war. I mean, I went into it with an attitude, hey man, we're gonna fight a war on poverty. I'm down. I'm down. Let's fight this war. And I actually read the bill, as I tend to read stuff. I read the bill that created the Office of Economic Opportunity. And the bill said one of the things you have to do is have maximum feasible involvement of the poor. So I thought what that meant was that poor
Nobody care what poor people think.
Yeah, poor people should be like on the board. They should get some of the money. Because you know how it is when money comes down to fight poor people? A lot of people will say right off the bat, you cannot end poverty by giving people money. Well, hell, that is actually how you end poverty. If you give people money, it's kind of like counterintuitive, right? No, you got to teach people how to fish. You can't give them no fish. If people are hungry, you need to do both. You need to give them fish and you need to teach them how to fish, right? And so my view was, okay, I'm in charge of this money. How do I make sure that people living in these neighborhoods get some of this money? How do I make sure that we go and fight to get the biggest slumlord in the city off of the board that's supposed to fight poverty? How can you fight and the enemy is on the board? So, I mean, I had a fairly mundane view about, what this was all about. And everything that I've learned, man, about organizing, I learned from the people in Durham, North Carolina. So many people who are no longer with us.
What year was this?
I talk about them in my book.
What year was this?
So I went to Durham in like 1965, and so I was there from 1965 to 1976 when I came back to Milwaukee. And what most people don't know, Steve, who think I'm anti-union, I'm really not. I'm anti the teachers union. I'm anti any union or anybody who stands in the way of progress for our people. Because I've actually been the business agent for a union. I tried to unionize Duke Hospital. I was the business manager for the maids and janitors at Duke University when a man named Oliver Harvey, Mr. Harvey, was like back in the 1940s, Steve. Mr. Harvey stood up at Duke University and said, my people need better working conditions. You know, these are the people who live like in my heart and soul. You feel what I'm saying?
I do. I completely do.
And so, like the people that you're talking about, you know, who are making these speeches, talking about me, this and that, I really don't care about that, man. I honestly don't care, because what I know is every minute you spend thinking about what somebody said about you on Twitter, or what somebody said about you on Facebook, or wherever it is, or Snapchat, wherever, you know, whatever you're using, that's minutes that you take away from thinking about what can I do to make sure that my kids have a better day today than they had yesterday. What do I do when I see kids coming to our school who had no place to sleep the night before? What do I do when I know that the breakfast and the lunch that we serve at school may be the only really two good meals that these kids get? What do I do when I see kids coming in, you know, crying because of conditions that exist in their homes? What do I do when I know that we got kids, man, who ought to get a medal just for showing up at school, given everything that they're dealing with? And so for me, the day that I don't focus on that, and I focus on what somebody is saying on Facebook or Twitter or on a campus somewhere, that's almost like a betrayal.
Right. So talk about that, because that's you know, because I agree with you. One of our communications people asked me to read an article that was written about us recently, and I said, "Why? I don't care. Like, I actually don't care." And she said, "Well, because we're mentioning it. I don't give a damn. I didn't write it. And if I want to talk, I can talk to people that my damn self. I don't need to read what somebody else said about something they think. I don't need that." But so I want you to talk about really the experience that you have of meandering through the State House, back to the hood, to the State House, back to the hood, and what that travel is like. So what is it like to fight for policy changes and then to come down through the Black middle class, many of whom use school choice or parent choice, but may not and get it, right? But don't understand, but don't fight for it publicly, and then come all the way down to you're in the school with that you and others started, and you're having conversations about why this child just told the teacher to go fuck herself. Like the complexity of that. So that is for you probably between 7 a.m. and 7:30. Those things happen within 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, so let me say a couple of things. Number one, I don't want people to think that I don't respect people like Chris Stewart or you know, Sharif or Charles, all these people who are out there engaging, with these folks every day. I do respect that work. I ain't gonna do it. I'm not gonna do that. It ain't gonna be me. But I respect people who have to do it. And so I want to make sure I say that very clearly.
That's why they like you better than they like me, because I
no, but I do respect that, But like I said, I ain't doing that.
I'm not doing either, but I hear it.
But what we're talking about, and see, we've talked about this a lot. One of the people I learned a great deal from was Derek Bell.
Oh yeah,
I got to know Derek Bell.
People don't know Derek Bell. Face at bottom well. Some of the people consider him a father.
Silent covenants. Yeah, and in fact, it is seen in some places as, quote, the father of critical race theory, which really started with critical legal theory, which is a whole another discussion, right? But in any event,
super dense book. Super dense, super dense, super dense, super dense.
But he talked about this concept of interest convergence theory. INTEREST, interest convergence theory. And what Derek Bell said was, the reason why Black people made progress during the civil rights movement was because at that time, the United States was trying to convince the rest of the world that democracy was a better form of government than communism. Hard to do that with Bull Connor sicking dogs on people. So at a certain point in time, the white rulers called Bull Connor, hey man, you got to quit sicking dogs on people because you're messing up a larger thing here. So at that moment in time, our interests converge with their interests, but it can never be permanent because we're coming at it from two different worldviews. And what it also forces us to do, the scenario that you talked about, is being very clear on the difference between strategy and tactics and principle. So that, for example, I started my book out talking about a meeting with the young.
So you name your book again? Name your book.
Yeah, If There's No Struggle, There's No Progress. And it came out in 2014. And so, and it was, I was so fortunate to have Lisa Frazier Page collaborate with me. Lisa Frazier Page is the woman who collaborated with those three brothers in Newark to write the book called The Pact. Where they had a pact to become doctors, and two of them became doctors, and one became, so Lisa worked with them on it. But anyway, so I started a book out talking about a meeting with the younger Bush when he was governor. So because I was down in Texas,
George Bush.
So he was governor of Texas, and I was down in Texas trying to get some Black legislators to support some parent choice legislation. And they said, hey, you need to go meet with George Bush. I was like, man.
George Bush, the guy who went on to become the Republican president. George Bush, Kanye said, doesn't care about Black people. That George Bush, people told Howard Fuller, this Black nationalist Marxist who started Malcolm X University. People forget, but that Dr. Fuller started Malcolm X University.
Right.
Should talk to George Bush in Texas.
Yeah.
Now back to our story.
Yeah. And so I rolled up in there, and it was four people in there, a woman named Susan Mitchell, Margaret Spelling, who ultimately became, Secretary of Education, George Bush, and me. And the meeting was supposed to go like for half an hour. It went like for an hour and a half. And the interesting thing was I actually left there liking George Bush as a person. And so, because he asked questions, how a lot of these governors and stuff, you go in there and they just, and you're supposed to sit there and act like what they said actually meant something. And he wasn't like that at all, right? And so when we got up to leave, he was like, I'm going to be the next president of the United States. I was like, yeah. And I want you to come to Washington with me. I was like, no, man. Like, first of all, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. And, you need a loyalist. Person like me, I'm subject to go off.
Yes, you are.
He said, well, but would you help me with my education thing? And so I ended up, Steve, being on a committee that helped him write his first two speeches on education, the one in LA and the one in New York. Well, then it got out in the papers, Howard Fuller working with George Bush, right? So all my brothers and sisters came at me, you in bed with the devil, and I was like, hey man, like, let me be clear. I may be sitting on the side of the bed, but I ain't get under the sheets. And but the point I'm trying to make is that for me, that was a matter of strategy and tactics. For some people, my meeting with George Bush was for them a matter of principle. It wasn't for me, but it was for them. Fast forward, for me, meeting with Donald Trump was a matter of principle. But I understood that there were other brothers and sisters for whom that was an issue of strategy and tactics, right? Because that's the way this works, right? Because if you truly believe in a political sense that you don't have permanent friends and enemies, that you have permanent interests, then you're always trying to figure out how do you pursue your interests. And the thing, Steve, that I keep telling, I've been saying for years for Black people, is that a lot of Black people who say all of this and that about white people function as if white people are omnipotent. That is to say that if I go into a room and it's a room full of white people, why do you always assume that I'm going to get co-opted? Why is it that you don't think that we have the capacity to function in a way where we are in places where we're not the power center. But we go into those places because we're trying to get some power, some resources for our people.
Right.
But the point I'm trying to make here is that in order to do that, you have to do all of these maneuvers. But as long as you're clear, and I've always been clear on why I'm doing what I'm doing, then you can maneuver, because it is an issue of strategy and tactics. The problem comes when you do something that violates what is for you a principle.
Right. As long as what you say does not change per the audience, then you are a person who stands on principle.
Exactly.
But if you speak differently in different places, then what you're saying is more of an indication of tactics than it is of principle. So if you go to speak with George Bush, or if you would at that same time have gone to speak with the equivalent of Jesse Jackson at that time, if you went to speak with either of them and you said something different because the audience changed, then you would not be a man of principle. What people don't understand is that it's far more complicated than who you talk to. It's what you're saying. If you're saying that I will not speak to an entire group because I disagree with them, then that is your right. But I can say that if I stand in front of Alec today, and if I stand in front of the United Negro College Fund tomorrow, or then the United Way the following day, no matter who I stand, or I stand in front of United Way Church of God in Harlem, if I'm saying the same thing, then I stand on the same principle. But if I go to each one of these with a different message, then I am not. I am co-opted. I am a tactician. And there I find myself in a weaker point. What I've seen from you, no matter where you are, apparently nobody told Howard Fuller that there's supposed to be different people that you say different things to. Because I've seen you lose your mind in all sorts of places. I'm thinking, oh man, y'all shouldn't have done that.
Right. No, but Steve, that comes from being both true to yourself, but more important, true to our people, right? And the thing is, the only way you're never not going to make any mistakes is not to do anything. You know what I mean? So at some point,
which is the biggest mistake of them all.
Yeah, you may do something and it turns out to be a mistake, or you do something and you go back and you think about it and you say, I wish I had approached that slightly differently, or I should have done this. And when you're speaking all the time and you go back and you critique yourself, you're always saying, God, I didn't mean it exactly like that, or I wish I would have made that point more clearly.
That's one of the things that separate us. I've never had that feeling.
Yeah, well, but see, I done heard you speak because you're just bringing it, right? But I think the point I'm trying to make is that none of us out here are perfect, right? The question, though, is, what do you really deeply care about? Do you really deeply care about our people? And I do. And I deeply care about our people, Steve, because I am where I am today because of my mother and my grandmother, right? I owe my mother and my grandmother a debt, right? But I also owe Claudette Colvin. I also owe Fannie Lou Hamer. I also owe Rosa Parks. And obviously, there's Martin and there's Malcolm, but there's all of these people that who gave their life, who nobody really knows about, who gave their life so that we could vote, or who gave their life so that we could go into a bathroom that white people go into. And so when you step back and you think about it, at least I feel, a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous debt to those people, because they, Frantz Fanon wrote this book called Wretched of the Earth. And in this book, he said, every generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission and either fulfill it or betray it, right? And I've always felt that way. And I feel like I owe a debt to that generation even before me, who paid a huge debt. And with all due respect to those of us who are fighting today, every generation has to deal with what's in front of them and the circumstances under which they struggle. But Steve, don't compare what we're doing today to what people went through in Mississippi trying to get people the right to vote.
Because I think that it's easy to get caught up in the platitudes of the moment.
Yeah,
it's easy to speak on the big topics. Can you talk about a day in the life of a 1960s activist. Like, so you wake up and you go to work, whatever work looks like. Can you talk about that? Because I don't think that people understand on a granular level what actually happened, not the glorified.
Right. Well, but the thing is, Steve, the point I want to make here is that everything has to be dealt with within the context of its historical circumstance, right? And so what I'm trying to say very clearly is I have great respect for people who are struggling today. I want to make that very clear. For people who are fighting at whatever level they decided to fight. But the point I'm trying to make is, though some of the contexts within which we fight is not comparable to previous historical contexts in terms of what it is that people were facing on a day-to-day basis. But when you say that, that's never to say that however people choose to struggle today, that's not important. It is important. Whatever it is that people are doing today to try to move the needle. But what we have to do is we have to be careful about making comparisons back to previous historical periods and judging our level of struggle against theirs. And I just, always want to make that point. I mean, for me, it's like, because I've been listening to sports all day today, and, to hear people argue about, Steph Curry, right? Steph Curry, changed basketball because, we ought to be shooting. I'm like, oh my God, what? You can't you just love Steph Curry for what he's doing today? Why you got to go back?
Right, because we don't always change the game, because that's not what's happening. And you are on the front lines for real. You are in the school for real.
But I'm not. But Steve, I'm not in it like those teachers and those principals are in it every single day.
Okay, talk about that.
And I hear a whole lot of people out here running their mouth about what ought to happen in education. Some of them ain't been in a school in years, ain't been near no kids, ain't had to deal with no kids, and damn sure ain't had to deal with a pandemic. There's no playbook for what is currently happening today. There is no playbook because there's no people alive who've had to deal with this in what is currently happening. And so I have the utmost respect for people who are in there every single day working with our kids, dealing with all the stuff that the kids are bringing, while at the same time they're trying to deal with their own personal issues, their own family issues, and so to go in there every day and to give everything that you have for our children, I have the utmost respect for those folks. And I think those of us who are not doing that work every day need to be really careful about our analysis of what people should be doing, right? Because you ain't in there every day, man. And you need to be a lot more humble and have a lot more humility about your theories about what should be happening.
I mean, like those people who try to get tenure down at North Carolina, don't get it, and then go somewhere else and work towards it and talk about the Black community as if they understand what the plight is of Black people trying to get access to a quality education, like that kind of stuff, you mean?
Yeah, I'm not talking about any particular individual.
Yeah,
I'm just talking about people in general. And really, Steve, again, I'm not trying to be, quote, disrespectful, but at the same time, I'm also trying to be real in terms of what is actually happening today. Today, what is going to happen tomorrow. And when I see what is both from the standpoint of what is happening in the school, but as you know, Steve, it's all the stuff that is going on in our community right now before our kids ever get.
The community is on fire. The community is on fire. Yeah, and anyone who thinks anything other than that is out of their minds. Right now, it is. When I walk to the train in Harlem, every single block from 104th up to about 112th, maybe, yeah, up to 112th, has at least one, if not two, police cars parked every day right after school with at least 2 cops standing outside every day. I've never seen anything like this. It's never been this bad. I talked to Jeff Canada a couple months back. He said that he was, he reminded me that he'd been educating in the crack era. And he said, that ain't this. This is different. This is different. I don't know. Is that your experience?
Right. Yeah, Jeff's absolutely right. There's not been anything like this. And what I worry about is the unraveling of civil society. And I know that may sound, like over the top, but I don't think so.
No, very practically, when people say things to each other, when our kids say things to each other on the internet, there's nothing civil about it. And then when the parents come down and want to fight each other, there's nothing civil about it. And when I have to talk to a parent and talk her down about fighting another parent about something that a 13-year-old said, that I am in this space where my head, like if there was a bubble above my head, it would be saying, are you serious? Am I really having a conversation with a grown person about not fighting another grown person because of something that a child said on the internet?
Right.
Like, this is really what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, but here's the problem. Number one, we're having to do more of it. And the depth of it is different. And the other thing that's real is social media is one of the greatest things that ever happened and one of the worst things that has ever happened.
You'll say
because
that again.
the ability to, like there used to be a thing that was a fight at the school, right? It was kind of contained, right?
Yes.
The two people, blah, blah. Now there's a fight at the school and you look up and here comes both people's families and cousins. And
as it's happening. No. Dr. Fuller, as it's happening, meaning I'm hearing such and such's mother and uncle are downstairs, say they're about to come upstairs and fight a child.
Right.
A child. So this is why I don't have the patience for people who are on the internet talking about what should or should not happen, arguing over what type of school a kid should go to. A charter school is taking money away from the neighborhood schools, or these are not public. If your ass is in that space, you are so disconnected that you're an embarrassment to the conversation. You need to shut up because you don't know what you're talking about. Because if that's what you think, if that's what you're concerned about what kind of school a kid is going to, you've lost your whole mind and you have no credibility, none, for those of us who are out there literally trying to get our teachers to come to work because they're scared because they think somebody's going to kill them at work. When that's what you're talking about is the politics of whether or not there should be more charters or not, or whether or not you should have vouchers or not. If that's your thing, then you're an idiot and you don't understand what it is that we're really fighting, because you know what? I don't give a damn what kind of school it is. I know right now in Connecticut and New York, there are schools shutting down. Sure, there's COVID, but they're shutting down because people are afraid to go to school. And not just poor Black schools. I'm talking about one of the wealthiest school systems in the United States of America, Farmington, Connecticut, shut down this week because they were scared. And you think I care what kind of school it is? They got kids there. You think I care whether it's Black or white kids there? Those are mostly white kids there. But their parents are just as afraid of anyone. And if that's where your head is, you're a fool. And no one at any level should be listening to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, I would just go back to our earlier conversation about parent choice and ask people who are still out there thinking about this, do you see a difference in the way that people reacted to parent choice when people with money decided to create pandemic pods and try to create all kinds of different ways to help their children? Where was the uproar about that? Where was, oh no, we shouldn't be doing that?
Brother, where's the uproar when the Black and Latin caucus? Where's the uproar when the Black and Latin caucus send their Black and Latin kids to private schools, to charter schools, to VOTEC schools? And then when they did send their kid to a quote unquote public school, they're usually a magnet school within a traditional school. So they don't send their kid to the junky neighborhood school that the kids that they represent, the parents that they represent, that they are forced to send their kids to. It's the clownery of it all. It's these people who won't even, who claim to be fighting for our community, but don't. Look, if you wouldn't send your kids to the school, don't call it my school. Call it my job, but don't call it my school.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is, see, like, what really always is the reality that we have to face is that a lot of the people that we are talking about or describing or whatever, they're not about to change because their interests are wedded in sustaining the status quo. And so the reality of it is that we're going to have to get up every day and go to war for those of our community who have the least. And we're going to be fighting it on multiple fronts. And it's going to be that way. At least I know it's going to be that way for my lifetime. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be that way for yours as well. And I think the thing is to figure out how not to just say, I can't do it anymore. Because we can't have that. We need another 25 years out of you, my brother.
Well, that I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. They all they did was piss me off. So what I recognize is that we'll find ourselves fighting in the course of a day. I'm fighting to get more access to more kids who don't have access to a quality education. At the same time as I'm fighting to get the people who are paid to teach them to give them an excellent education. At the same time as I'm fighting with the parents who tell me that their child's not coming to school today because they don't feel well, not because they don't feel well, because they just don't really want to come, that I'm fighting the kid to get him to come to school. And then I'm fighting the senior to get him to believe that he can apply to a college because I'm fighting the system that told him that he can't go to college and he actually believes that. And I'm fighting to get him to apply to the college that I think he can get into. But I'm also fighting to let him know that he can push himself, but he has to put himself. It's a fight after the fight after the fight after the fight after the fight that we do all day. It's that if you look at my calendar, it's that it fills my inbox. It's that I spend my day doing. And it's that when I'm talking to people about the challenges of the work that we do, it's those layers of complexity that they don't often understand that you have lived. You both fought to get people to organize to vote, and you fought to get people to stop them from limiting our vote. Can you talk about how you've existed over the years across multiple planes at the same exact time?
Yeah, I mean, again, we sort of talked about in the sense that if you're committed, right? Like one of the things I tell people is that if you decide to fight for social justice for our people for 5 minutes, are you prepared to live with the contradictions that come with that? And are you willing to take the weight for what you have to do to make that happen? So, for example, I've spent time having people attack me for where you get your money from, right? And so one of the issues I always ask people is, how much money are you willing to give me? Because one of the lessons I've learned here is, and maybe it's an obvious one, it's hard to get money from people who don't got no money. At some point in time, if you're trying to get money, and if you can't get money, Steve, to do things, it's just ideas. Ideas are wonderful things, but to be able to implement ideas, you have to have resources. And in order to get resources, you have to go to people who got resources. The reality, right? And what's really interesting is you'll have people who will criticize you for taking money from somebody, and so then you ask the question, well, where do you get your money? Because everybody get money from somewhere. Somebody whoever's out here doing something.
But push the inconsistency, though. Let's push the inconsistency. They want me to work with someone. They don't want me to take money from a drug maker, but they wouldn't be opposed to me working with a drug dealer in the community. So what am I supposed to do? I'm not interested in people telling me who I should work with. I'm gonna work with whoever I gotta work with to get our kids to where they need to be. Full stop.
Right. But see what it does, it goes back to the issue of principle, strategy, and tactics. It also goes back to being knowledgeable. So, for example, one of the things I learned from reading this book called Force for Freedom, the Sister Callie Jackson wrote it. It's a great book. I didn't know that a Black woman had funded John Brown's attack on Harper's Ferry. And what I also didn't know was the battles that went on between Black abolitionists and people like Garrison over the issue of what was it going to take to eliminate slavery. Because the Black abolitionists more and more had taken the position that it was going to be about violence. And that Garrison's idea was that you could persuade the body politic to change. And the reason why I'm mentioning all of these things is to say that you and I both know that if you're going to fight out here, you got to find people who are allies, and you got to find people who are going to be your ally, but who are willing to understand what their role is going to be in being your ally. And then you got to be able to like take these alliances where you can get them to try to move the needle, right? But you always have to be clear that you can be helped, but you're not going to be controlled. And that's a very different reality. Because when we came out of slavery, two groups of white people approached us. The missionaries with their view about what they should do, and the corporations with their view about what we should do. And so the reality, power, and
We appreciate you staying by. As you know, technology doesn't always work to our advantage. So Dr. Fuller will be back in a moment. If there's anything that you should be taking from this conversation, is that Dr. Fuller is a person who has not just now, but spent the past 70 years fighting for our community, and who understands just how complicated an endeavor it is to fight for our community, and does so not just from on high, but does so in Milwaukee, where his school is. And he has done so in places in every hill and hamlet throughout the nation, places that many of us have never heard the names of. He has not done so because he seeks fame or fortune, but because he sees the necessity in creating opportunities for others, whether he's fighting for poor people in the mid 60s or for poor people in 2021. Dr. Fuller is somebody who has given his all to our community. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to him is because he provides a look into both Christmas past and present. He can tell us what it was like to be on the front lines during a time that many of us would refer to as the civil rights heyday. He can break down what it is that was happening. He doesn't have to romanticize what it must have been like to be part of the Black Power movement, because he was part of it. He was someone who was on the front lines then and remains on the front lines now. As you think about your role in educational justice, my hope is that you can see the work that Dr. Fuller is doing. Dr. Fuller, I know that we went out, I was talking to folks about how it is that you've been able to sustain yourself from this time, and how you have existed as both the ghost of Christmas past and present, and giving us a sense of what it takes to get to that next place. We don't have much time. I know I've kept you longer than I promised I would, so forgive me. You knew I was.
Hey, I'm always happy to talk with you, Steve. You know that, man.
Likewise. So, folks, one of the things that Dr. Fuller and I have done a couple times is we've started organizations together. And let me tell you why that's important to me. I'm just going to speak personally. It is so important to the generations that came before us to be willing to work with those who come behind. And I mentioned at the top of this that Dr. Fuller is somebody who I saw with great respect, but from a distance. I didn't know how he would receive me. You never know, right? And he was warm then. But we've worked together since then. And one of the things that he has been an ardent proponent of is that Black people speak for themselves, self-determination. And we've started a couple of organizations. Some worked and some didn't. And self-determination is a complicated endeavor. I'm going to ask you to close this out and talk to us about, we started an organization called the Freedom Coalition for Charter Schools, in which we went out and picketed during the Democratic debates during the last presidential election. And so that night where Senator Elizabeth Warren lost the election, quite frankly, you would notice if you looked in the foreground that Dr. Fuller was standing right there. And it was he and Miss Sarah who confronted her about sending her child to private schools. We called into question the powers that be, but we did so as ourselves. Dr. Fuller, can you talk about the complications, quite frankly, of executing self-determination? Because it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, first of all, you know, we got to give Sister Sarah a shout out, because I mean, she was, I mean, she was huge that night, man, and she, you know, just, you know, took it to Elizabeth Warren and caught her in a lie, you know, and so, you know, both of us have nothing but love and respect for Sister Sarah, you know, just in terms of what she's fighting every day of her life down in Memphis. And, you know, for people like her, this is not about theory. You know, this is about day-to-day struggle in life, right? And some
hand-to-hand combat, literally hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, and she's going through a lot right now because, you know, as you know, she lost her grandson.
I do.
You know, and so, you know, but anyway, you know, I just want to make sure we give her a shout out, you know, for what she did. So I'm sorry. So ask me that again, because that's
fine. So what I want people to understand are the challenges of establishing self-determination.
Oh yeah.
Just saying we're gonna form our own organization, because it ain't that easy. You got to put people in it.
Right. So you know, so Steve, what you and I did was we said, look, Bernie Sanders is out here, you know, coming at charter schools, and you know, people who are, quote, in charge of the charter school movement, as you know, they were saying, well, we should just be quiet, you know, don't make a fuss, blah, blah, blah. And you and I said, the hell with that, right? We you know, we gonna get up in their face. We gonna go at them. And the difference that we were clear about is that we have many, many friends who are part of the charter movement, people that we respect and all of that, but they don't have the same stake in this that we do. And the thing about self-determination is that you want to position our people so that our people can speak for themselves. And what we saw was that there were two elements to this. That the attack on charter schools was an attack on the right of our families to choose, which is key to self-determination.
And our educators to choose to open their own schools.
Right, and then for educators to be able to create schools for our children. That those were the two elements of the attack on self-determination that we saw. And we felt that a coalition that was led by Black and brown people needed to move to the forefront. And we needed to be vocal, we needed to be clear, we needed to be unapologetic, and we needed to be forceful. And so that's what we did. And as you know, people were telling us, oh, you know, don't do that, you know. And so that night that the Powerful Parent Network, led by Sarah Carpenter, rolled up at Clark, I think it was.
Yeah.
I mean, Elizabeth Warren was in her full bloom.
She thought she was at a coronation. She had a Black woman about to announce her at a Black college. She was in a coronation mode.
Yeah. You know, and everybody was, you know, loving her and this and that. And when Sarah and the people from the Powerful Parent Network, and those of us like me who were there to support them, stood up and disrupted I mean, people were like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do with these people?" You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, they was up there talking about Martin Luther King and all of this, and so the thing was, excuse me, one of the things that Martin Luther King did was to disrupt power. Was, you know,
that's all he did.
Right,
if we're gonna be honest, that's all he did.
right. So here we are the ones who are standing in the shadow of Martin Luther King to disrupt this and to make it clear that we have a right to speak on behalf of our own people. And so it was, but every time you do that, you know, you get all of this pushback and, well, you know, this and that and blah, blah, blah. But the reality of it was that it was a necessary thing to do. And, you know, we did it. And as you know, we didn't ask nobody. See, that was the other part of it. We didn't ask nobody if we could create that organization. We didn't ask nobody if we could go demonstrate by the Democratic debates. We did it. And we stood there. And we never apologized one iota for demanding the right of self-determination. That's the reality of it.
Right. Well, brother, I could do this with you all night, but I know that you've been up all day, and I appreciate the opportunity. Let me say here, you know, talk about not giving people their flowers while they're still alive. Please know that I know we got another 30 years with you, but let's just say I appreciate you. You stand as the high water mark in our community of manhood. You stand as a brother who I look up to and aspire to be like. My hope is that one day I will make you and those who you have supported proud. That we are carrying on your legacy. I by no means, no stretch of my imagination think that the work that I've done touches the breadth of what you've done. But I do want you to know that what you've done inspires me to work harder every day.
Yeah, I just want to humbly disagree with you because I think the value of your work, brother, is immense. I really do mean that. And it is a mutual admiration society and all of that. But I just want to be clear that the work that you're doing, Sharif, Charles, you know, Sister Sarah, you know, there are other men and women out there who are every day getting up, doing the work in schools, right? They're fighting. The organization that we helped create that's now being led by Brother Rashawn. You know, you got Jay out in California, you know, who just took over Parent Revolution. And so, you know, we have people who picked up the mantle of struggle, right? And are trying to advance that struggle every single day. And you're one of those people. And I want you to know that appreciation and love that you just sent my way, I'm sending it back to you and sending it back to all of my brothers and sisters who are out there fighting every day for our people. And I just hope for all of you all that you have a safe and peaceful and joyous holiday season. You know, whether you're dealing with Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever it is you deal with. I hope it's a time of peace and joy and happiness, and because of what we're dealing with, safety. You know, that people come out of this on the other end in 2022 healthy and re-energized, right? To carry on the fight for our people. And thank you so much for having me on your show.
I will have you as many times as you would come. I want to say to those folks who joined us tonight, I see your questions and comments. I'm sorry. When I'm talking to Dr. Fuller, I selfishly want to talk to him myself. So thank you all for your comments and questions. At another time, next time we have him on, I'll go to your questions. But I do want to say this. Even a grain of sand is part of the beach. And no one of us is so great that we should ever overestimate the impact that we make on the world. However, it is occasionally that you're walking across even the most pristine beaches that you will find a stone, and in some others a boulder. And Dr. Fuller is that boulder. He is a man who stands out and stands up. And many of us have stood on his shoulders and have, because of him, been in a position to save others. I want to thank you all tonight. There's so many other people you could be watching talk, in many cases, about things that matter to you or maybe them, but may not matter to others, but they matter to you. But that you took tonight to hear us talk about our community and the fight to improve things moves me. I want you to be reminded that I don't think that the smartest person in the room is the one with the best answers. I believe that it's the one with the best questions. So when I say that there are no dumb questions, I mean, I want you to know that there are no questions that are dumb. It is your job to ask the questions, because questions will crumble the most powerful in front of us. So thank you so much for tonight and every night. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for taking time out. Y'all take it easy.